Okay, so this one is about the nature of symbiosis, but I want to talk about symbiosis from a ternary perspective. Symbiosis is typically two entities living together as one and enhancing each other's capability and capacity to thrive because of the dynamics of that relationship. And the reason for that is because symbiosis, the original meaning of it, is companionship or living together. So, a ternary perspective, you would say that there are three things living together harmoniously that are enhancing each other's capability and capacity to thrive. But in reality, you can have millions of things living together symbiotically. And that would really, to my mind, that's a state of thriving. But I think the word really becomes harmony at that point, harmonious. But there are nuances to this. And so the first thing I want to do is just is to share the nuance between symbiosis and codependency. Codependency is a word that's got so much shame attached to it these days. But that's kind of needless. The nuance to codependency is that there's a sense within one of the living entities that without the other, it could not survive on its own. And so the bond is held in place by a fear of death or a need to survive, a belief that without the other, that they could die or that they will die. And so it's codependent. In order to survive, I need you. And we've all felt this needy energy from people before, the neediness in others. When you sense the gravity of someone's energy pulling you towards them, and you can sense the neediness in it, within them, it's more than likely born out of a fear that unless they continue receiving something from you, then they, at some level, they fear for their own well-being. And which is human nature. If you really believe that you are incapable of surviving alone, you will be radiating needy energy, especially if your vulnerabilities, the aspects of your life where you feel as though you are inadequate, if they are revealed, it will certainly trigger that kind of energy. So symbiosis, on the other hand, comes from the perspective of a sovereign entity, knowing and understanding that with or without the other two components, it can survive. So the fear of death has been negated. However, the desire to thrive and to become more and to enhance your capacity to thrive and evolve and become more and experience, more diversity of life, more richness of experience, it can be enhanced symbiotically. And so it's not born out of a need to survive. It's born out of a desire to live purposefully and intentionally, and to become more and to experience more. So very, very different energies, very, very different. And the ternary perspective, there is an aspect of your nature that is born of something infinite. You are a binary expression of something that is infinite. There is an aspect of your nature that is indifferent to death. But that's not the binary aspect. So hopefully that sets the scene. And so symbiosis, from a ternary perspective, I'm going to look at the disentanglement of what, to my mind, are the three aspects of our own nature that work together as one, perpetually seeking homeostasis together, but always in flux. And, so let's look at, I want to look at it actually through the perspective of, let's say governance. So you as a human being, you have to govern yourself. For you to be sovereign, you have to be capable of self-governing and self-regulating. So in a scenario within which you have become aware that you are not just one thing, you're not your body, you're not your mind, and you're not just the electricity running through those things. You are all three working together symbiotically. Then, this is what happened within me, the desire to curiously explore the full capability and capacity of each individual component had to come at the expense of constraining one or more of those aspects so that the other could reach its zenith. And this is an experiment that I did with myself over the course of 3 years. And I came to disentangle these three aspects and understand their nature as a singularity from a singular perspective, so that I could consciously weave them back together in ways that are harmonious and desirable. And the thing that first becomes apparent is all of the ways we are inadvertently repressing aspects of our own nature in order to experience the extreme of the desire of another component part. So, one of the classic ones is the desire for peace. Most of us have a strong desire to experience peace, but what I would say is that we inadvertently mistake comfort for peace all the time. We think that a state of comfort is where we're going to find peace, but you can be simultaneously comfortable and in a state of discord and disharmony. So comfort is not peace. And in a perpetual seeking of peace through comfort, what we do is we repress the aspect of our nature that is seeking challenge. And unfortunately, that's where growth kind of stops. If you are averting challenge, then there is no innovation in your life. There's no newness. There's no aspect of your nature that's seeking the newness, because all innovation is born out of that which is unknown, and everything, all newness, everything that is unknown, has to come from a state of challenge. Challenging the status quo, challenging the truth, challenging whatever it may be. Because unless there's a problem, there is no solution. And the solution is innovation. Everything in nature that is growing and evolving is a solution to a problem, to some aspect of our nature that is limited and wanting to expand into something more. So that'd be my first real point of, reference point, is that be very aware of where you're inadvertently seeking comfort instead of peace. Thinking you're seeking peace, but instead seeking comfort, because peace resides within, the hearts of men and women, and it's a state of being that means you've got your mind and your body and your emotions working together as one harmoniously, symbiotically, aware of the needs of each, of the nature and the needs of each individual component. And then really the zenith is how they can complement each other in order to enrich each other's experience symbiotically. So I'm going to go into, that's the governance of a human being. You receive a thought, and here's the interplay that I utilize myself to make sure these components of my own nature are complementary. And so my default setting is openness. So I'm perpetually seeking to be in a fluid state, like a liquid state. And if you think of wealth, if you think of people who are wealthy, managing portfolios of wealth, they have varying states or varying degrees of liquidity to their assets. Some of their assets are extremely fixed over long periods of time. That's like a rock solid base foundation. Some of their assets are slightly more liquid. Their ability to liquidate those assets is they're able to achieve it in a shorter space of time if need be. But then they always have a liquid pool that they can access very quickly when they need liquidity, and they can access that spontaneously. So the closer you are to being in a liquid state, the more spontaneously you can act. So the more nimble you are, the more agile you are. But you want to be as lean as possible. In a scenario within which you need to act spontaneously, then you want high levels of liquidity. Otherwise, you can't capitalize upon opportunities in the moment that they arise. And it's the same as a human being. You want to be in as close to a liquid state as possible, because when opportunities arise where a truth emerges, an emerging truth arises that renders your previous conceptions or your previous judgments obsolete, you want to be able to evolve into that new truth without resistance, without trying to cling on to the previous version of yourself that needs to now die, so that you can become the new version of yourself that has adopted that new truth, you see. And so if you are unable to be fluid, if you're unable to remain liquid, if you have not got high liquidity as a human being, then when an emerging truth arises, what you'll do is you'll reject that truth. It'll trigger you, you'll feel pain, and you'll want to project your current beliefs onto the source of that truth. Oh, but this and that and the other thing, I've spent this many years doing this, I've spent this many years doing that. I've devoted my life to this. Now you're saying this is invalid. And so you'll want to, and that this, in fact, I've come to know this emotion very well. It's mercy. Because the potential grief that you have to feel in order to let go of some truths, to create space for an emerging truth to be true, the grief required sometimes it's too overwhelming, and it's just not possible to let it go instantaneously, unless you become highly adept at being liquid, at being fluid. And this is the thing. To be in a highly liquid state, you have to have come to the point of being able to allow your mind, your thoughts, your impulses, and your emotions, you have to be in a state of total allowing of all three. That's the only way to be in a liquid state. So you're prepared to be wrong in any given moment. You're prepared for everything that you currently believe now to be rendered obsolete in the next moment. You're prepared to be present and willing to judge every single thought that comes, no matter how dark and deep, and no matter what the interpretation of that thought might mean. And that's the prerequisite. If you receive a thought and it's really dark and it's about yourself, and you know that if you are to interpret that thought and judge it, you know that the interpretation of that meaning means that you believe something about yourself that's really horrible, or that you're reminded of a part of yourself that you're still ashamed of. And so you have this fear of the wrath of your own judgment. Then you will project, you will lash out against that thought. You'll probably try and, jump into a meditation to avoid it. But to be in a liquid state, to be fluid, to have high liquidity as an individual, you're going to see the thought, you're going to give it your unconditional presence, you're going to allow yourself to interpret the meaning of that thought, you're going to allow the emotion that is evoked because of your interpretation, because of what you believe it means, and you're going to feel that emotion wholly. And when you feel that emotion wholly, you'll allow yourself to interpret what that means. I am this, I am that, I'm insignificant, I am useless, I am powerful, whatever it may be. The free flowing of a thought, the use of judgment to interpret the meaning, the accepted truth of that meaning, evoking deeper and deeper emotion. And you're sinking deeper and deeper into a state of allowing as you claim the I am, the interpretation of those emotions. I am this, I am that, without resistance. Remembering that these are all of this power you're claiming as you go, I am insignificant, I am powerless. They are simply the aspects of your nature, of the infinite aspect of your nature, that mean the opposite thing in binary, you see. So if I'm useless, if I claim that I am useless, from a singular perspective, the infinite perspective, that's what dormant potential is. It's a pool of potentiality. It's useless. You can't use it for anything. You cannot use it for anything. But it's the most potent state in existence. I'm insignificant. I don't matter. It's because the infinite is immaterial. It's pre-matter. So you're claiming the infinite aspect of your nature as you claim your shadow. And I've come to believe that the reason we call it shadow work is because we're claiming the darkness, the infinite space, the absolute presence of all sound, of all possible sound, with no beginning and no end. So you see, I am small, I'm insignificant. When you come to claim all of these parts of your nature that you think are wrong or twisted or distorted, you realize that they're just hidden parts of the infinite aspect of your nature that the binary part of your nature is opposed to, because it means the opposite thing. So being in this total state of allowing every thought, allowing every judgment, trusting every judgment, claiming the truth of the meaning of that judgment, and then allowing the emotion that's evoked because of what that means, because of the truth of what that means, and sinking deeper and deeper into the emotion as it changes. I'm insignificant. I'm nothing. I'm not worthy. I'm a disgrace. And you come to, you'll feel feelings, and sometimes you won't even have a word for it. I've had that quite a few times. It's like, I've never felt this emotion, and I haven't even got a word to describe it. And so then what you do is you start studying words to figure out the meaning so that you can interpret them properly. Like when I found the emotion within me that I'm a disgrace, then I came to realize that it's just the opposite of grace. So matter is disgrace. if grace is fluidity, it's the infinite. A state of grace is no beginning and no end. It's fluid. Then disgrace is what light is. It's quantized sound, packets of light. That's what disgrace is, the creation of sound. And I found that very vividly within myself. So you see, everything is valid. And if there's anything you resist within your body, any experience that you resist or reject as a human being, it's just the opposite. It's just the perspective of the infinite that your binary nature is rejecting. And so the more and more you claim of your shadow, from the binary perspective, they seem like they make you less powerful. From the singular perspective, they're making you profoundly and infinitely more powerful. Because as you're claiming the I am of those emotions, I am insignificant, you're claiming your infinite nature. And you're becoming fluid. You're creating liquidity. So yourself as an asset, you're becoming so adaptable to change and so open to innovation that you're becoming an absolute force of nature, in truth. And now I am, so I do want to be open and honest about the pros and cons to having this perspective and to living your life like this. Is you grow to become indifferent to people's suffering. Now this is quite an intimate thing to share. But when I say indifferent to people's suffering, it's more that you become indifferent to the emotions of pity. So if someone's in a pitiable state, because you know they're so close to a breakthrough, there's a part of you that becomes really hopeful for them, and you're kind of willing them to go deeper. And now that's a very difficult perspective for someone that is feeling that pain and suffering. There's no way they can relate to that or resonate with it. So, and the other thing is you become indifferent to, it becomes highly irritating when innovation is being stifled. So if you're in an environment within which there's an abundance of, let's say, consensus decision making, and it's stifling the innovation that the individual human beings that, if they were sovereign and empowered, could make a decision to move forward and create innovation, the process of consensus decision making is stifling that innovation. That becomes highly irritating. And even worse, if you're in a company or an organization that is purely role specific, and there's dormant potential of the human beings in those roles that's being underutilized. You know, I use in my podcasts, I use the archetype of an accountant quite often. You know, an accountant can also be a photographer and can also dabble in graphic design. It becomes highly irritating to see dormant, I call it wealth. I believe that our gifts and abilities and our skills, I believe that's the source of our wealth. And so when I see dormant wealth within a human being being stifled because they are constrained by a role, that becomes highly, highly irritating. And so I'm always I'm constantly seeking to create pools of wealth, of liquidity, that are really just talent pools that are not constrained by a role, so that then they become highly liquid and then extremely, they can spontaneously evolve to meet an unmet need. So, my perspective can be, and I would say my influence in an environment that is stifled can be highly agitating for the people around me. And then, I kind of having an indifference to that, to the fact that it is irritating, it can be, it can cause a bit of disruption, but that's the nature of innovation. So, but what I want to do is I want to temper this, because symbiosis is important, and not all human beings are capable of walking around in a liquid state. They might be the equivalent of a fixed asset, and it might take them 12 months to reconcile in a conflict that will lead them to a state of inner harmony, and therefore reach a liquid state. So, and you have to have symbiosis. You have to have everything. If you want harmony, you have to create an environment within which whatever state a human being is in is relevant, and they don't have to. They're not being forced to change if that's not what they want to do. It's absolutely essential. And so, in the same way that a portfolio manager manages a portfolio of assets, manages wealth, they do have some that are fixed. I do have some assets that will take a long time to liquidate. They have some that are slightly less, and then they have a highly liquid pool. You have to have an environment that allows everyone to be exactly as they are without being forced to go against their nature. And this is where true harmony comes in. So of course it's aspirational to be able to express your nature in a liquid state. Of course, there's no better state to be in order to thrive and to grow. But that's not everyone's cup of tea, and so there has to be an environment within which someone can be in a state that does not want to change, that wants to remain where they are. And in asset management and portfolio management, this is where you have people who are focused on preservation. So when you want to preserve something, you're not actually trying to change it or get it to grow or change or do anything different. You're trying to preserve it, meaning that you're foreseeing what it may need and you're providing it before it requires that thing. So the how you're expressing your nature, how you are nurturing that thing, is enabling it to stay where it is at now. And this is critically important in terms of infrastructure. And so you actually don't, in that scenario, the greatest threat to infrastructure that we are dependent on is change. Your focus and your intent is for it to remain exactly the same. And without going too deep into it, this is where, how I see the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems, whereby everything that the body depends on for survival has to be preserved at any cost. You don't want it to alter and change. It has to be immutable to a certain degree. And those are our fixed assets. We want to preserve them. And the nature of preservation is to resist change. It's to resist innovation. So you see, harmony, in a state of harmony, everyone has to be able to coexist and follow their own nature. And so this is where you see the separation of powers. This is where you see symbiosis as a really important thing. You want there to be someone who is resistant to change, preserving the fixed assets, resisting change, resisting innovation at any cost. In society, we see these as our regulators. Our regulators are in place to keep everyone safe, to preserve the health, the well-being, the innocence of our people. Their job is to resist change. Their job is to resist innovation so that the things that we depend on wholly don't change. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be innovating. But what it does mean is that we need sandbox environments. I mean, that's an inevitability. So resistance to testing sandbox environments by regulators, that's not something I'm overly keen on. And so this is where I apply pressure. You know, I totally understand that your job as a regulator is to protect and preserve the status quo. Totally get it. But I need an environment within which to explore the fullness of my nature in a highly liquid state with radical innovation, totally pushing the boundaries at the other end of the spectrum. Regulators preserve our essential assets that we depend on for survival. People like me in a highly liquid state, ultra innovative. I need an environment within which I can experiment with, leapfrogging industries and solving, the biggest problems that we're facing as humanity through radical innovation. Now, let's say in that scenario, let's say we build a prototype and it solves climate change. Now, what's the problem with that? You might think that's a wonderful thing. But it's just the beginning, because the transition is the hard bit. The transition is the hardest bit. There are dozens of ideas that I see on a regular basis. There are white papers that I read that have massive potential, but probably need billions of dollars to be developed. But it's the transition that's the problem, because unless the transition can take place without doing any harm, you can't implement that innovation. If the reason we're innovating is for the well-being of human beings, and then the transition is devoid of grace, then what's the point? Might as well stay where we are. And so this is where we need to get much, much better, especially in New Zealand, where a lot of other countries use us as a sandbox. They use us as a test bed to get product market fit for innovation, because we are great at adopting new technologies and we're pretty representative of a lot of economies. But we're much more nimble, much more open-minded, and in truth, quite a lot less sophisticated in terms of regulation and things. So, good safe place to test things. However, we haven't latched onto this as a nation, and we're not leveraging our potential as a sandbox nation in the world that's attracting innovators where they can come and get product market fit for their R&D. And that's product market fit is what we call the valley of death. It's the abyss in between validating the innovation or the technology, like building a prototype, and making it commercially viable. And then designing operating models that can scale that thing through exponential growth. And once you get product market fit, that tends to be that's the point where you've de-risked the venture. And this is where the tug of war is between venture capitalists and founders of innovation is, they're always trying to get the other one to de-risk it. And so, places like Callaghan Innovation, where I'm working at the moment, we try and bridge the space in between, try to align the innovator with the fund, and help them to de-risk it as much as they can. And working with people who can help them to do that as well, so that they can kind of, just bridge that space in between to get product market fit. Once it's been de-risked through getting product market fit, Much easier to get capital for the next round as long as the numbers make sense. So you see a scenario within which we need these two to work symbiotically. Radical innovation, and you could almost call it radical preservation. You want the extremes of both, and you want there to be tension between them. That's the whole point. But grace is where they meet in between. So, for example, if I come up with the solution to climate change tomorrow, and I can even build a prototype tomorrow, that's not going to be realized in society tomorrow. It could be a 5-year horizon, 3-year horizon, 10-year horizon, who knows? But the important piece is how we meet in between those who are tasked with preservation, those tasked with innovation, and we come together to bridge the space in between. And that's the very epitome of symbiosis, to create harmony. The bridge in between that we build together is like the third element in the ternary system. So you're allowing for the extremes of both. By allowing the extreme nature of both aspects to be what it is, and to be in opposition to each other, what the space created in between is a hybrid of both. And it's as simple as that. And in the same way, you as a human being, as a self-governing entity, if you can figure out how to do this within yourself, then that's how you create harmony within yourself as well, where the decisions that you're making come from a place of accommodating both perspectives. Then you're golden. And you want to consciously create your life in a way whereby you can appreciate the extremes of every aspect. Where you can, most human beings, a common theme is, abundance. I want to create abundance for myself. Well, you actually don't want to create abundance, because an absolute presence of all substance is actually, it's total stagnation. It's a total presence of everything means that there's no presence of a singular thing. You can't discern separation from everything. And so you begin to use lack to your advantage. You purposefully create lack. You purposefully operate at a deficit of some aspect of your nature, so that once a week you can allow that a spike in that aspect of your nature to experience something special. When you purposefully introduce lack into your life and you allow it to compound, let's say, over a week, and then you indulge the opposite, the opposing aspect of that nature, the experience of it is profound. And so, harmony doesn't mean balance. It has nothing to do with balance. Harmony means that you're aware of how the fact that every aspect of nature is seeking symbiosis, seeking harmony, and you use that to sculpt your life, to purposefully and intentionally create the experiences that you want to have. And I think, seeking that fluidity, seeking to be in that purposefully, in that intentionally liquid state, whereby you can spontaneously resurrect, be reborn and allow the previous version of yourself to die without holding on to that. You do want an immutable baseline in your life. You want a baseline experience that you're going to trust yourself, that you're never going to allow to be altered and changed. That is the roof over your head, the source of your income, your daily routines, and the standard baseline that you're going to determine is homeostasis for you, for your life. And you're going to trust yourself enough that you're going to commit to that baseline and you're not going to breach it. You may make amendments to it from time to time, but you're going to agree that you're not going to put that stuff at risk ever, regardless of the opportunities in front of you. And this is how you self-regulate. This is how you self-regulate. You're open to spontaneous innovation in the moment. You're willing to allow aspects of your nature to die instantaneously, but never at the risk of disrupting your baseline level of survival for you as a human being. Now, I've pushed myself to the absolute limits of this, so my baseline is very low. One of the benefits of the experiment that I've done is that you begin to realize exactly how self-reliant you can be when you've got minimal access to resources, support, and when you're living as a recluse. You begin to realize how that you can actually survive on your own, and that's a very empowering realization to come to. So I wouldn't recommend my baseline for everyone. However, whatever baseline feels good to you and right to you, you have to trust yourself to self-regulate that. Nothing is ever going to threaten that. And what that cultivates within you over time is unimpeachable trust in yourself. And in the same way societies grow distrustful of governments, it's when they make decisions that detrimentally impact the baseline, or what they perceive as the baseline level of survival that a government needs to provide. That's the singular issue, is that if you can't trust a government to make decisions that will not detrimentally impact the baseline infrastructure and foundation, that's the seed point of mistrust. But if you know that there's a baseline that is unimpeachable, you can always rely on it, you can always depend on it, you'll be seeking more. You'll be seeking to innovate. You'll be willing to take more risks because you know that safety net's there. People think that if we provide a baseline for human beings, like a universal basic income or something like that, we think that they're just going to become perpetually lazy and do nothing. And the truth is, some will do that. But what it will liberate is it will unlock the curiosity and the willingness of human beings to explore. And Kiwis, we really are explorers. Big time. We're a nation of explorers. It's what we want to do. It's like part of our nature is to be curious. Now, if you have an unimpeachable baseline that you know that no matter what happens, you're going to survive. Imagine what that unlocks in you. And it's actually immense what it will unlock in you. It's immense. Your risk profile will change radically. And so, as a nation, what is the baseline that we want? We have to be willing to allow people to totally and wholly depend on it. If they're so afraid, and if they're in a state of such mistrust of their own judgment, if they haven't been able to create an unimpeachable baseline for their own life, it's going to take them longer to build that trust in themselves again. But what will happen is if we can give them a reason to trust the environment around them, that for once in their life, their environment isn't seen as adversarial, it's seen as nurturing. That no matter what happens, no matter what choices they make in their life, that we're going to make sure they're going to survive. If we can create that unimpeachable baseline, those people can begin to heal over time. They can begin to take steps. And believe me, the stagnancy that comes from, not moving and not changing over time, by default, the curiosity within people will arise, and they'll begin to take steps forward. And it may take a generation or two or whatever. It doesn't matter. Government can work symbiotically with the people of New Zealand, but we've got to stop making decisions that are detrimentally impacting our baseline foundation. And that begins, the very beginning of that is for us to stop making decisions to give away our assets as a nation, our source of wealth. We've got to figure out how to stop allowing our true assets, which are our people. Every human being has an endless array of capability that's being untapped. And there are so many reasons for a New Zealander to go and live offshore now, especially in Australia. Some of the most talented people I know, that because they're explorers, they go off to Australia, they go off to bigger markets. We have no ability to retain that capability in New Zealand. And our assets are they're just all leaving the nation. Selling our sources of wealth, our assets, our land. We have to build perpetual wealth in New Zealand so that we have an adequate surplus to first of all, create an unimpeachable baseline foundation for every human being so that they know that no matter what happens, they are going to survive. Not thrive, but they will survive. No matter what happens, no matter what rug is pulled out from underneath them, they will survive. Requires wealth, requires a surplus, and it requires that source of wealth to be compounding and unimpeachable. But at the moment, we have a myriad of issues that we use as a nation as reasons not to become wealth focused, not to be portfolio focused. Government legislation, rules. It's we're not allowed to do this because of XYZ Act. Well, let's dissolve it. Let's become wealth generating. One of the interesting ones I find is, I work for a government agency, Callaghan Innovation, and there's this. Recently we had a whole bunch of chief executives willingly take a 20% pay cut from government agencies to help the nation as like a service to the public because they're getting paid too much. But the reality is that if you are at chief executive level for a government agency and for the private sector, and then you take a 20% pay cut, all of a sudden you're at risk of going to a private sector organisation and then the government agency losing that capability and the wisdom. And it's so short-sighted, it's just unbelievable. If we want a powerful, complementary government to create an immutable baseline, we want the smartest people we can find. And those people, they're not going to be the cheapest people. They're likely going to be the most expensive. So we have to understand, we have to invest in people, not try and get them to give away their value. It's insane. And I'm sure most people really are they're not, if this triggers you, this kind of thing, I'd highly recommend exploring what it takes to become someone capable of holding the responsibility of a massive company and organization and the burden of responsibility. It is utterly immense. It is utterly immense. Even more burdensome as a founder with investors. The sense of obligation to turn your venture into something successful can be crippling. So, if we want to be wealth generating as a nation, we have to invest in the best people. We have to figure out how to retain them, how to enable them to endlessly explore. And that begins with an immutable baseline foundation that is unimpeachable. It guarantees survival. And then through osmosis, raises the risk profile of all New Zealanders so that they can explore. And they're willing to take a risk in order to evolve into something new and something more, because they feel safe enough to take that step. So, that feels about the right place to end. So the ternary perspective is binary plus infinity. So it is almost paradoxical, but I think the best way to think of this from a binary perspective, if ternary is a bit too confusing, is to just think to yourself, okay, in binary, it's about polarity. So left, right, up, down. And so what we actually want is to enable and allow the extremes of everything. We need to create an environment where the extremes of every perspective are accepted and encouraged to follow their nature. And collaboration bridges the space in between. And that's how we create grace. That's what grace is. It's the bridge between the extremes. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. That's it for now for the Nature of Symbiosis. Talk soon.